In this video, I'll show you how to make a mini ecosystem that will live for years to come, just like this one. Let's get straight into it. I'm going to use this glass vase to make the terrarium in. A terrarium this size definitely needs a drainage layer. This will serve as a place for excess water to sit instead of it sitting in the substrate. For this build, I'm using Leucobryum as it's very lightweight and porous. You can use pretty much any rocks or stones that you've got available. It doesn't need to be too deep, and just a few centimetres would do the job. If I was to pour the substrate in now, it would fall through all the gaps and cracks between the Leucobryum. This is where a substrate barrier should be used. I like to use window screen mesh as it's very affordable and holds the substrate back well while still allowing water to freely pass through. I place the terrarium on top and roughly cut out the shape. This doesn't have to be exact and actually works better if it's a little too big. The substrate will have a hard time getting through these small gaps. Talking about substrate, here's what I'll be using. This is my substrate mix, which I use in pretty much all my terrariums. Here's how to make it. It's made from 1 part cocoa fibre, 2 parts sphagnum moss. I like to chop these up into smaller pieces as it blends into the mix much better. 1/4 part orchid bark, 1/4 part charcoal and 1/4 part worm castings. All the components come together to make the perfect terrarium substrate. It holds moisture, is resistant to compression, contains nutrients for the plants and is well draining. These are all key characteristics of a quality terrarium substrate. With the substrate complete, I'm now going to go ahead and pour it into the terrarium. At the moment, I'm only pouring in a small amount so that I have a base to build the hardscape on. For the main hardscape of this terrarium, I'm going to be using a couple pieces of driftwood which I think will look great. I've already played around with the hardscape for a little while off camera, so I roughly know where the pieces are going to go. Here's what I came up with. It's very simple, but it's perfect for the layout I've got in mind. Now I'm going to take each piece out and attach some dragonstone to the base. This will not only improve the look of the hardscape, but it will also make the driftwood much more stable, which is ideal. I experimented with a few different pieces of dragonstone until I found the ones I wanted to use. To attach them to the wood, I'm going to use the superglue and tissue method. I simply wedge some tissue between the contact point of the wood and the rock and then soak it in superglue. It dries in no time and forms a strong bond which is 100% terrarium safe. In case you couldn't tell, I repeated the process for multiple contact points between the wood and the rock. I did the same for the other piece of wood as well. I don't know about you, but I definitely think that the dragonstone adds to the look of the hardscape. Before moving on, I'm going to go ahead and build up some more height in the back of the terrarium with more substrate. Sloping the substrate up towards the back is a simple and easy way to improve the sense of depth. With that done, the hardscape can now be placed inside for the final time. I gently dug them into the substrate to keep them stable and stop them from falling over. Now I'm going to go ahead and add a few more pieces of dragonstone throughout the foreground of the terrarium. If you plan on making something like this yourself and you don't have the dragonstone, you can simply use some rocks or stones that you found outside. I only added a couple pieces, but I really like how it looks. Now it's time to bring the scape to life with plants. I've got this Boston fern which I think will be great at filling out the space in the back of the terrarium. After taking it out of the pot and removing all the soil it was grown in, I'm using some long tweezers to create a hole in the substrate. I then took the roots of the fern and planted them inside. Make sure you gently pat the substrate down in and around the base of the fern. I really like how it's instantly filled out the back of this terrarium. Now I'm going to take some moss and start filling out the foreground. For this build, I'm going to use some cushion moss. I'm tearing it up into small, manageable chunks and then using some scissors to trim off the base of the moss. This won't hurt the moss at all and it will allow it to sit much closer to the substrate, which will result in a better looking terrarium. Whilst I'm planting this moss, let me quickly tell you about my terrarium making ebook. It contains everything you need to know to make long-lasting, healthy terrariums that will live for years to come. Here's just some of the information inside. It would definitely give you a massive head start and help you avoid some of the unfortunate mistakes that beginners make. If you're interested, it will be at the top of the description and in the pinned comment. Now I'm going to take a few more pieces of dragonstone and fill in some gaps around the scape. It's looking much better, so now I'm going to go on and add some more plants. I want to plant them throughout the moss in the foreground. This is a red Fittonia, and I think it'll add a nice pop of colour inside the terrarium. I keep it in a smoothie tub as it replicates terrarium conditions and helps it adjust and grow much faster. I'm simply using some scissors to take some rootless cuttings from the plant. I'll be planting these into the moss up to the first set of leaves. They'll root themselves and start growing in no time. This is known as plant propagation, and it's a great way to multiply your plants for use inside terrariums. I really like the colour that they bring to the scape. To contrast the red plants, I'm going to add some white Fittonia as well. I'm taking the cuttings and planting them the same way I did before. I'm really liking how it's looking, so now I'm going to fill in the gap down the centre. I left this open so that I could create a sand path. This is really easy to do, and it's a great way to bring some interest into your terrarium. For the best look, have the path wider at the front with it gradually getting narrower towards the back. This will greatly improve the sense of depth and make it look as if the path is leading off into the distance. To blend the path into the rocks a little better, I'm going to add some small pieces of dragonstone. I'm not worrying too much about where I place these. Now I'm going to plant this small cutting of Ficus quercifolia climbing up the piece of wood. This is definitely one of my favourite plants to use inside terrariums. Its leaves stay small and dark green, and it's relatively slow growing. This is good as maintenance will be a lot less frequent than a terrarium with lots of fast growing plants. To add some more detail and interest, I'm going to take some spiderwood branches and place them inside. This is a super simple and easy way to improve the look inside the terrarium. You certainly haven't got to do this, but I really like the detail that it brings. With the spiderwood in, it's now time to add some springtails. These are tiny little bugs that will keep the terrarium clean and healthy. They do this by eating things like mould and decaying matter. It's even more important that I use them in this terrarium as there's a lot of wood which is prone to growing mould. Now with a spray bottle, I'm going to give the terrarium a good spray down. It's very important not to overwater the terrarium and only water it until the substrate is damp but not wet. Left open, this terrarium would dry up and die in no time. This clear acrylic lid is a quick and easy fix. I'm really happy with how this terrarium turned out, and I can't wait to watch it grow and evolve. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a like, and why not subscribe so you don't miss any future builds or updates. Thanks for watching, and why not check out this video here, as I think you might enjoy it too.